The role of the judicial branch. The judicial branch of the United States government plays a critical role in maintaining the balance of power among the three branches of government. It is tasked with interpreting the laws, resolving disputes, and upholding the rule of law. This branch serves as a vital check on the executive and legislative branches, ensuring that their actions adhere to the Constitution. The judicial branch is essential in safeguarding the principles of democracy and ensuring justice is served impartially. Interpretation of laws. One of the primary responsibilities of the judicial branch is to interpret the laws enacted by the legislative branch. The Constitution, as the supreme law of the land, often requires interpretation to apply its broad principles to specific cases. The judicial branch, led by the Supreme Court, interprets these laws and ensures they are applied correctly. This process involves reviewing statutes and determining their constitutionality, thereby providing clarity and consistency in the application of laws across the country. The Supreme Court, as the highest court in the land, has the final say in interpreting the Constitution. Its decisions set precedents that lower courts must follow, thereby ensuring a uniform interpretation of laws nationwide. This role is crucial in maintaining a coherent legal system where laws are applied consistently, regardless of where a case is heard. Resolving disputes. Another critical function of the judicial branch is to resolve disputes. This includes disputes between individuals and the government, and between different branches of government. The courts provide a formal mechanism for resolving these conflicts, ensuring that all parties have a fair opportunity to present their case. In the case of disputes between individuals, the judicial branch ensures that justice is served by hearing evidence, interpreting the law, and making impartial decisions. This process upholds the rights of individuals and ensures that legal obligations are met. When disputes involve the government, the judicial branch acts as a guardian of constitutional rights. It has the authority to review actions taken by the executive and legislative branches to ensure they comply with the Constitution. This judicial review process is a fundamental check on the powers of the other branches, preventing any potential overreach and protecting individual liberties. Upholding the rule of law. The judicial branch is integral to upholding the rule of law, a cornerstone of democratic governance. The rule of law ensures that all individuals and government entities are subject to the law and that laws are applied fairly and consistently. The courts play a vital role in enforcing this principle by interpreting and applying laws impartially. Through its decisions, the judicial branch reinforces the idea that no one is above the law. This includes holding government officials accountable for their actions and ensuring that laws are not applied arbitrarily. By upholding the rule of law, the judicial branch helps to maintain public trust in the legal system and the government as a whole. Checks and balances. The judicial branch acts as a critical check on the powers of the executive and legislative branches. This system of checks and balances is designed to prevent any one branch of government from becoming too powerful and to ensure that power is exercised within the limits set by the Constitution. The power of judicial review allows the courts to invalidate laws and executive actions that are found to be unconstitutional. This serves as a check on the legislative branch, ensuring that the laws it enacts do not violate constitutional principles. Similarly, it acts as a check on the executive branch by reviewing the constitutionality of executive orders and actions. The judicial branch also ensures that the rights and liberties guaranteed by the Constitution are protected. This includes reviewing cases involving civil rights, freedom of speech, and other fundamental rights. By safeguarding these rights, the judicial branch helps to ensure that the government respects the individual freedoms that are essential to a democratic society. Judicial independence. The effectiveness of the judicial branch in fulfilling its role depends on its independence from the other branches of government. Judicial independence ensures that judges can make decisions based on the law and the Constitution, without undue influence from the executive or legislative branches. To protect judicial independence, the Constitution provides for lifetime appointments for federal judges, subject to good behavior. This provision insulates judges from political pressures and allows them to make impartial decisions. Additionally, the salary of federal judges cannot be reduced during their time in office, further ensuring their independence. The structure of the federal courts. The federal court system of the United States is a complex and multi-layered network designed to interpret and apply the law across a vast and diverse nation. This system is structured into three main tiers: district courts, circuit courts of appeals, and the Supreme Court. Each of these tiers plays a distinct and vital role in the administration of justice, ensuring that the law is interpreted consistently and fairly. A. District courts. The district courts serve as the foundational tier of the federal court system. These courts are the primary trial courts where cases are initially heard and evidence is presented. The United States is divided into 94 judicial districts, each with at least one district court. Some states, particularly those with larger populations, have multiple district courts to handle the volume of cases. Functions and jurisdiction. District courts have original jurisdiction, meaning they are the first courts to hear both civil and criminal cases. Civil cases can involve a wide range of issues, including disputes between individuals, corporations, and the government. Criminal cases involve the prosecution of individuals or entities charged with violating federal laws. In these courts, judges oversee the proceedings, ensuring that trials are conducted fairly and according to legal procedures. They rule on motions, manage the admission of evidence, and, in some cases, issue verdicts. However, many cases are decided by juries, with judges guiding the process and ensuring that the jurors receive appropriate legal instructions. Role in the judicial system. The role of the district courts is crucial as they are the first point of contact for most federal cases. They provide a forum for litigants to present their evidence and arguments, and they ensure that legal disputes are resolved according to the rule of law. The decisions made by district courts can be appealed, which brings us to the next tier in the federal court system, the circuit courts of appeals. B. Circuit courts of appeals. The circuit courts of appeals are the intermediate appellate courts in the federal system. There are 13 circuit courts, each covering a specific geographical region, known as a circuit. These courts review decisions made by district courts within their respective circuits. Structure and jurisdiction. The 13 circuit courts include 11 numbered circuits that cover different groups of states, the District of Columbia Circuit and the Federal Circuit. The Federal Circuit has nationwide jurisdiction over specialized cases, such as those involving patent law and certain international trade disputes. Circuit courts do not conduct trials. Instead, they review the record of the lower court's proceedings to determine whether there were any legal errors that could have affected the outcome of the case. This review process is primarily based on written briefs submitted by the parties, although oral arguments may also be heard. Appellate process. When a case is appealed to a circuit court, a panel of 3 judges typically hears the appeal. These judges examine the trial court's record, the arguments of the parties, and relevant legal precedents. Their role is to determine whether the law was applied correctly and whether the rights of the parties were respected during the trial. The circuit courts can affirm the lower court's decision, reverse it, or remand the case back to the district court for further proceedings. Their decisions are binding on the district courts within their circuit, establishing precedents that guide future cases. C. Supreme Court. The Supreme Court of the United States stands at the apex of the federal court system. As the highest court in the land, it holds the ultimate authority in interpreting the Constitution and federal law. The Supreme Court has the power to review decisions made by the lower federal courts as well as state courts in cases involving significant legal and constitutional questions. Structure and composition. The Supreme Court consists of 9 justices, including 1 Chief Justice and 8 Associate Justices. The Supreme Court has both original and appellate jurisdiction. Its original jurisdiction is limited and includes cases involving disputes between states or cases involving foreign diplomats. However, the vast majority of the Supreme Court's work involves its appellate jurisdiction. The court has discretion over most of the cases it hears, choosing a small number of cases from the thousands of petitions it receives each year. This process is known as granting a writ of certiorari. The court typically selects cases that present significant constitutional issues, conflicts among lower courts, or matters of great public importance. Role in the judicial system. The decisions of the Supreme Court have profound implications for American law and society. As the final arbiter of constitutional interpretation, the court's rulings establish precedents that shape the legal landscape of the nation. Landmark decisions, such as Brown v. Board of Education, which ended racial segregation in public schools, and Roe v. Wade, which recognized a woman's right to choose an abortion, illustrate the court's powerful role in addressing pivotal societal issues. The Supreme Court also plays a crucial role in maintaining the balance of power among the branches of government. Through judicial review, the court can invalidate laws and executive actions that violate the Constitution, ensuring that the legislative and executive branches operate within their constitutional limits. Conclusion. The federal court system, with its 3-tiered structure, is designed to ensure that justice is administered fairly and consistently across the United States. The district courts serve as the trial courts, handling the initial presentation of evidence and arguments. The circuit courts of appeals provide a mechanism for reviewing and correcting potential errors made by the district courts. At the pinnacle of this system, the Supreme Court ensures that the Constitution and federal law are interpreted consistently and that the fundamental rights of individuals are protected. Each tier of the federal court system plays a distinct but interconnected role in the administration of justice. Together, they uphold the rule of law, protect individual rights, and maintain the balance of power that is essential to the functioning of a democratic society. Through their combined efforts, the federal courts help to ensure that the United States remains a nation where justice prevails and the Constitution endures. The power of judicial review. Judicial review is a fundamental principle of the American legal system that grants federal courts the authority to determine the constitutionality of laws and actions undertaken by the government. This power, established by the landmark case Marbury v. Madison, 1803, has solidified the role of the judiciary as a co-equal branch of government and an essential component of the system of checks and balances. Establishment of judicial review. Marbury v. Madison. The concept of judicial review was firmly established in the early 19th century with the Supreme Court case Marbury v. Madison. The case arose from a political dispute following the presidential election of 1800, in which Thomas Jefferson defeated the incumbent president, John Adams. In the final days of Adams' presidency, he appointed several Federalist judges to the judiciary, including William Marbury as a justice of the peace for the District of Columbia. However, Marbury's commission was not delivered before Jefferson took office, and the new Secretary of State, James Madison, refused to deliver it. Marbury petitioned the Supreme Court for a writ of mandamus, an order compelling Madison to deliver his commission. Chief Justice John Marshall, writing for the court, faced a dilemma. On one hand, denying Marbury's request could undermine the judiciary's authority. On the other hand, ordering Madison to deliver the commission could provoke a political conflict with the executive branch, which might simply ignore the court's order. Marshall's decision was a masterstroke of judicial statesmanship. The court held that Marbury was entitled to his commission, but it also ruled that the specific law granting the Supreme Court the power to issue writs of mandamus, the Judiciary Act of 1789, was unconstitutional. This ruling established the principle that the Supreme Court had the authority to review and nullify laws that conflicted with the Constitution, thereby asserting the power of judicial review. The role of judicial review in the system of checks and balances. Judicial review is a critical mechanism for maintaining the balance of power among the three branches of government: the executive, the legislative, and the judicial. By having the authority to interpret the Constitution and invalidate laws or executive actions that are deemed unconstitutional, the judiciary serves as a check on the other branches, ensuring constitutional compliance. The primary function of judicial review is to ensure that all laws and government actions comply with the Constitution. This involves interpreting the text of the Constitution as well as applying its principles to specific cases. The judiciary's ability to strike down unconstitutional laws reinforces the supremacy of the Constitution, ensuring that it remains the ultimate authority in the American legal system. Protecting individual rights. Judicial review also plays a vital role in protecting individual rights and liberties. By reviewing the constitutionality of laws and government actions, the courts can safeguard the rights guaranteed by the Constitution. Landmark cases such as Brown v. Board of Education, which ended racial segregation in public schools, and Miranda v. Arizona, which established the Miranda rights for criminal suspects, illustrate how judicial review can be used to protect individual freedoms and promote justice. Preventing abuse of power. The power of judicial review acts as a safeguard against the abuse of power by the legislative and executive branches. By having the authority to review and potentially nullify government actions, the judiciary can prevent overreach and ensure that the other branches operate within the bounds of their constitutional authority. This system of checks and balances is essential for preventing any single branch from becoming too powerful and threatening the democratic principles upon which the nation was founded. The impact of judicial review on American society. The impact of judicial review extends far beyond the courtroom. By shaping the interpretation of the Constitution and influencing public policy, judicial review has a profound effect on American society. Influencing public policy. Through its decisions, the judiciary can influence a wide range of public policy issues. Cases involving civil rights, environmental regulations, healthcare, and immigration, among others, often come before the courts. Judicial review allows the judiciary to ensure that these policies align with constitutional principles, thereby shaping the direction of public policy and societal norms. Promoting legal stability and predictability. Judicial review contributes to legal stability and predictability by establishing precedents that guide future cases. When the Supreme Court rules on a constitutional issue, its decision sets a binding precedent for all lower courts to follow. This creates a consistent legal framework that helps individuals and institutions understand their rights and obligations under the law. Controversies and criticisms of judicial review. Despite its crucial role, judicial review is not without controversy and criticism. Some argue that it grants unelected judges too much power, allowing them to override the decisions of democratically elected representatives. Others contend that judicial review can lead to judicial activism, where judges impose their personal views rather than adhering to the original intent of the Constitution. Conclusion. The power of judicial review, established by Marbury v. Madison, is a cornerstone of the American legal system. It empowers the judiciary to interpret the Constitution, protect individual rights, and maintain the balance of power among the branches of government. While it has faced criticism, judicial review remains an essential mechanism for ensuring that the United States remains a nation governed by laws, where the Constitution is upheld as the supreme law of the land. Through its exercise of judicial review, the judiciary continues to play a pivotal role in shaping American society and preserving the principles of democracy and justice. Interpretation of the Constitution. The U.S. Constitution, while a foundational legal document, often requires interpretation to apply its principles to modern circumstances. Different interpretive approaches can lead to varied and sometimes conflicting understandings of the Constitution's meaning. Two major approaches to constitutional interpretation are originalism and the concept of the living Constitution. Each method reflects different philosophies about how the Constitution should guide contemporary legal and political issues. A. Originalism. Originalism is an interpretive philosophy that advocates understanding the Constitution based on its original meaning at the time of its drafting. Proponents of originalism argue that the Constitution's meaning was fixed when it was ratified and that this original meaning should be the guiding principle for interpreting its provisions. Principles of originalism. Originalists believe that the Constitution should be interpreted according to the intent of the founders and the original public meaning of the text. This approach involves examining historical documents, such as the Federalist Papers, records of the Constitutional Convention, and other writings from the late 18th century, to understand how the founders and the public understood the text. The primary rationale behind originalism is that it respects the Constitution as a legal document that derives its authority from the consent of the governed. By adhering to the original meaning, judges honor the democratic process that produced the Constitution and avoid imposing their personal views or contemporary values on the text. Arguments in favor of originalism. Legal stability and predictability. Originalism promotes stability in the law by adhering to a fixed and identifiable meaning of the Constitution. This predictability allows individuals and institutions to understand their rights and obligations with confidence. Judicial restraint. Originalism encourages judicial restraint by limiting judges to the original meaning of the text, thereby preventing them from substituting their preferences for those of the framers. This restraint helps maintain the balance of power among the branches of government. Democratic legitimacy. By interpreting the Constitution according to its original meaning, originalism respects the decisions made by the founders and the ratifying public. This approach upholds the Constitution as a product of democratic processes and consent. Criticisms of originalism. Historical ambiguity. Determining the original meaning of constitutional provisions can be challenging due to the lack of comprehensive historical records and differing interpretations among the founders themselves. Rigidity. Critics argue that originalism is too rigid and does not account for the evolving nature of society. They contend that adhering strictly to 18th century meanings can result in outdated and unjust outcomes. Limited applicability. Some aspects of modern life, such as digital privacy and advanced technology, were unimaginable to the founders. Originalism may struggle to provide clear guidance on contemporary issues that have no direct historical analog. B. Living Constitution. In contrast to originalism, the Living Constitution approach views the Constitution as a dynamic document that adapts to changing societal norms and values. Proponents of this approach argue that the Constitution's broad principles should be interpreted in light of contemporary circumstances and the evolving understanding of justice and equality. Principles of the Living Constitution. The Living Constitution approach emphasizes the flexibility and adaptability of the Constitution. Judges who adhere to this philosophy consider the text's meaning in the context of modern society, often drawing on broader moral and philosophical considerations. This interpretive method is rooted in the belief that the Constitution was designed to be a living document, capable of growth and development over time. The framers, aware of the limitations of their own era, crafted the Constitution with broad and general language to allow future generations to apply its principles to new and unforeseen challenges. Arguments in favor of the Living Constitution. Adaptability and relevance. The Living Constitution approach ensures that the Constitution remains relevant and effective in addressing contemporary issues. By adapting to societal changes, this approach helps the Constitution fulfill its purpose of promoting justice and protecting rights. Moral progress. This interpretive method allows for the incorporation of evolving standards of decency and morality into constitutional interpretation. It enables the legal system to reflect societal progress in areas such as civil rights, gender equality, and privacy. Judicial responsibility. Judges interpreting the Constitution as a living document can respond to new developments and changing conditions. This approach allows the judiciary to play an active role in shaping a just and equitable society. Judicial activism. Critics argue that the living constitution approach grants judges too much discretion, allowing them to impose their personal views and preferences on constitutional interpretation. This judicial activism can undermine the democratic process and the separation of powers. Lack of consistency. The flexible nature of the living constitution approach can lead to inconsistent and unpredictable rulings. Without a fixed meaning, constitutional interpretation may vary significantly depending on the judge's perspectives and societal trends. Erosion of democratic authority. By allowing judges to adapt the Constitution to contemporary values, the living constitution approach may undermine the authority of the legislative and executive branches. Critics contend that elected representatives, rather than unelected judges, should determine societal values and policy changes. The debate between originalism and the living Constitution reflects broader philosophical differences about how the Constitution should function in American society. Originalism seeks to preserve the Constitution's original meaning and respect the intentions of the founders, promoting legal stability and judicial restraint. The living constitution approach, on the other hand, emphasizes adaptability and the need to interpret the Constitution in light of contemporary values and societal progress. Both approaches have their strengths and weaknesses. Originalism offers clarity and consistency, but may struggle to address modern issues effectively. The living Constitution allows for moral and legal evolution but risks judicial overreach and inconsistency. Ultimately, the interpretation of the Constitution is a dynamic and ongoing process, influenced by the evolving needs and values of American society. The balance between these interpretive philosophies continues to shape the judiciary's role in upholding the principles of democracy and justice. The role of precedent. Precedent, rooted in the doctrine of stare decisis, is a fundamental principle in the legal system that promotes consistency, stability, and fairness. Stare decisis, Latin for to stand by things decided, obligates courts to follow previous judicial decisions when the same points arise again in litigation. This principle ensures that similar cases are decided similarly, fostering predictability and reliability in the law. The principle of stare decisis. Stare decisis operates on the belief that once a court has resolved a legal issue, that resolution should be followed by courts in future cases involving similar facts and legal issues. This principle serves several critical functions in the legal system. Consistency. By adhering to precedent, courts ensure that legal principles are applied uniformly across different cases. This consistency helps to maintain a coherent and stable legal system where individuals and entities can predict the legal consequences of their actions. Stability. Stability in the law is crucial for society. When courts follow established precedents, they provide a stable and predictable legal environment, which is essential for individuals and businesses to plan and conduct their affairs with confidence. Fairness. Precedent promotes fairness by treating similar cases in the same manner. This uniformity in decision-making helps to avoid arbitrary or biased judgments, ensuring that all parties receive equal treatment under the law. Guiding judicial decisions. Precedent plays a critical role in guiding judges' decisions. When faced with a case, judges look to previous rulings on similar issues to inform their judgments. This reliance on past decisions ensures that the law evolves in a reasoned and orderly manner, rather than through abrupt changes. Binding versus persuasive precedent. Precedents can be either binding or persuasive. Binding precedent, also known as mandatory precedent, comes from higher courts within the same jurisdiction. For example, decisions of the U.S. Supreme Court are binding on all lower federal and state courts. Lower courts must follow these precedents when faced with similar issues, ensuring that the legal principles established by higher courts are consistently applied. Persuasive precedent, on the other hand, refers to decisions from courts in other jurisdictions or lower courts within the same jurisdiction. While judges are not required to follow persuasive precedent, they may consider it and be influenced by its reasoning, especially if it addresses a novel or complex legal issue. Maintaining fairness. Precedent helps maintain fairness in the application of the law by ensuring that similar cases are treated alike. This principle is essential for upholding the rule of law and ensuring that justice is administered impartially. By following precedent, courts demonstrate a commitment to legal principles rather than personal preferences, fostering trust and confidence in the judicial system. Evolution of legal principles. While precedent promotes stability, it also allows for the evolution of legal principles. Courts can refine and develop the law over time by distinguishing new cases from previous ones or, in rare instances, overruling outdated or incorrect precedents. This balance between adherence to precedent and legal development enables the law to adapt to changing societal values and circumstances. For example, the Supreme Court's decision in Brown v. Board of Education, 1954, overturned the precedent set by Plessy v. Ferguson, 1896, which had established the doctrine of separate but equal and upheld racial segregation. By overturning Plessy, the court recognized the evolving understanding of equality and the need to correct an unjust and outdated precedent. Challenges and criticisms. While precedent is a cornerstone of the legal system, it is not without challenges and criticisms. Critics argue that strict adherence to precedent can perpetuate outdated or unjust rulings. Additionally, some contend that an over-reliance on precedent can stifle legal innovation and prevent necessary reforms. To address these concerns, courts sometimes engage in a process called distinguishing, where they identify significant differences between the current case and previous ones, allowing them to reach a different conclusion without outright overruling precedent. This approach enables the law to adapt while maintaining the benefits of consistency and stability. Conclusion. The role of precedent in the legal system is vital for ensuring consistency, stability, and fairness. Stare decisis, the principle of following previous court decisions, guides judges in their decision-making and promotes uniformity in the application of the law. By adhering to precedent, courts uphold the rule of law and foster a stable legal environment where individuals and entities can confidently navigate their legal obligations. While precedent must occasionally evolve to reflect changing societal values, its foundational role in the legal system remains essential for maintaining justice and fairness. The Supreme Court's significance. The Supreme Court of the United States stands as the pinnacle of the judicial branch, playing an essential role in shaping the nation's legal landscape. Its decisions set legal precedents, address fundamental constitutional issues, and significantly impact individual rights and liberties. Through its interpretations of the Constitution, the Supreme Court influences almost every aspect of American life, from civil rights to economic policy. Setting legal precedent. One of the Supreme Court's most significant roles is establishing legal precedents that lower courts must follow. These precedents ensure uniformity and consistency in the interpretation and application of the law across the country. When the Supreme Court decides a case, its ruling becomes a binding precedent on all other courts within the United States. This doctrine, known as stare decisis, reinforces the stability and predictability of the legal system. Landmark cases and their impact. Throughout its history, the Supreme Court has issued landmark rulings that have profoundly shaped American society. For example, Marbury v. Madison, 1803. This decision established the principle of judicial review, empowering the Supreme Court to declare laws unconstitutional. This case cemented the court's role as a co-equal branch of government with the authority to check the powers of the legislative and executive branches. Brown v. Board of Education, 1954. In this landmark case, the court declared racial segregation in public schools unconstitutional, overturning the separate but equal doctrine established by Plessy v. Ferguson, 1896. This decision was a major victory for the civil rights movement and paved the way for further desegregation efforts. Roe v. Wade, 1973. The Supreme Court's ruling in Roe v. Wade recognized a woman's constitutional right to privacy, which includes the right to choose to have an abortion. This decision remains one of the most contentious and influential rulings in the court's history, impacting reproductive rights and laws across the country. These cases illustrate how Supreme Court decisions can reshape societal norms and government policies, demonstrating the court's profound influence on American life. Addressing constitutional issues. The Supreme Court is the ultimate arbiter of constitutional interpretation. Its primary function is to interpret the Constitution and ensure that laws and government actions comply with constitutional principles. This role is critical in maintaining the balance of power among the branches of government and protecting individual rights. Judicial review and constitutional interpretation. Through judicial review, the Supreme Court can invalidate laws and executive actions that it finds unconstitutional. This power ensures that all branches of government adhere to the Constitution, maintaining the rule of law. The court's interpretations of constitutional provisions often reflect broader societal changes and evolving understandings of justice and equality. For instance, in Obergefell v. Hodges, 2015, the Supreme Court ruled that same-sex marriage is a constitutional right under the 14th Amendment's Equal Protection Clause. This decision marked a significant shift in the legal recognition of LGBTQ+ rights and demonstrated how the court's interpretations can evolve in response to changing societal attitudes. Impacting individual rights. The Supreme Court plays a vital role in protecting and defining individual rights. Its decisions can expand or restrict the scope of civil liberties, influencing the lives of millions of Americans. The court's rulings on issues such as freedom of speech, religion, privacy, and due process have far-reaching implications for personal freedoms. Expanding civil liberties. The Supreme Court has been instrumental in expanding civil liberties through its interpretations of the Bill of Rights and other constitutional provisions. Key decisions include Miranda v. Arizona, 1966. This ruling established the Miranda rights, requiring law enforcement to inform criminal suspects of their rights to remain silent and to have an attorney during interrogations. This decision significantly strengthened protections against self-incrimination and ensured fairer police practices. Gideon v. Wainwright, 1963. The court ruled that the Sixth Amendment guarantees the right to legal counsel for criminal defendants in state courts, regardless of their ability to pay. This decision ensured that indigent defendants receive a fair trial, reinforcing the principle of equal justice under the law. Balancing rights and government interests. While the Supreme Court often protects individual rights, it also balances these rights against government interests and societal needs. This balancing act is evident in cases involving national security, public safety, and government regulations. For example, Korematsu v. United States, 1940. The court upheld the internment of Japanese Americans during World War II, citing national security concerns. Although this decision is widely criticized today, it illustrates the court's role in balancing individual rights with government interests during times of crisis. District of Columbia v. Heller, 2008. The Supreme Court ruled that the Second Amendment protects an individual's right to possess firearms for self-defense. This decision struck a balance between gun rights and regulatory measures aimed at reducing gun violence. The court's evolving role. The Supreme Court's role continues to evolve as it addresses new legal and societal challenges. Technological advancements, shifting cultural norms, and changing political landscapes constantly present the court with novel issues requiring interpretation and judgment. Responding to technological change. The rapid pace of technological innovation poses new questions about privacy, free speech, and government surveillance. The Supreme Court's decisions in cases involving digital privacy, such as Carpenter v. United States, 2018, which addressed the warrantless tracking of cell phone location data, illustrate how the court adapts constitutional principles to modern contexts. Shaping future legal developments. The Supreme Court's interpretations often set the stage for future legal developments and legislative actions. Its decisions can prompt Congress to pass new laws, influence state legislation, and guide lower court rulings. For instance, the court's decision in Citizens United v. FEC, 2010, which allowed unlimited corporate spending in elections, has had a lasting impact on campaign finance laws and electoral politics. Conclusion. The Supreme Court's significance in the American legal system cannot be overstated. Through its power to set legal precedent, address constitutional issues, and impact individual rights, the court plays a central role in shaping the nation's legal and societal landscape. Its decisions reflect and influence the evolving values and principles of American society, ensuring that the Constitution remains a living document capable of guiding the nation through changing times. As the highest court in the land, the Supreme Court continues to uphold the rule of law and protect the rights and liberties that are fundamental to the American democratic system. The nomination and confirmation process. The nomination and confirmation process for federal judges, including Supreme Court justices, is a critical aspect of the American political system. This process, involving both the President and the Senate, ensures that judicial appointments are subject to checks and balances, preventing any single branch of government from exerting undue influence over the judiciary. Understanding this process is essential to appreciating how federal judges attain their positions and the factors that influence their selection and confirmation. Presidential nomination. The process begins with the president, who has the authority to nominate candidates for federal judicial positions, including the Supreme Court, appellate courts, and district courts. The Constitution grants the president this power in Article 2, Section 2. Which states that the president shall nominate, and by and with the advice and consent of the Senate, shall appoint judges of the Supreme Court and all other officers of the United States. Criteria for nomination. When selecting nominees, presidents consider several factors to ensure that their choices align with their administration's legal and political philosophies. Key criteria include judicial philosophy. Presidents typically nominate judges who share their ideological leanings and judicial philosophy. For example, conservative presidents often seek to appoint judges who adhere to originalism or textualism, while liberal presidents may favor nominees with a more progressive or pragmatic approach to constitutional interpretation. Professional qualifications. Nominees must possess the requisite legal expertise and experience. This often includes a distinguished career as a judge, lawyer, legal scholar, or government official. The American Bar Association, ABA, evaluates nominees' qualifications and provides ratings that can influence the nomination process. Demographics and diversity. Presidents may consider demographic factors, such as race, gender, ethnicity, and geographic representation, to promote diversity on the federal bench. This consideration aims to reflect the nation's diversity and enhance the judiciary's legitimacy. Political considerations. Political factors, such as party affiliation, loyalty, and potential support from key constituencies, also play a role. Presidents often nominate individuals who can secure confirmation from the Senate and advance the administration's broader political goals. The Senate's role in confirmation. Once the president selects a nominee, the Senate assumes its constitutional role of providing advice and consent. This process involves several steps, each designed to scrutinize the nominee's qualifications, judicial philosophy, and suitability for the position. Senate Judiciary Committee. The nomination first goes to the Senate Judiciary Committee, which conducts an initial review. This committee, composed of senators from both parties, plays a central role in the confirmation process. Background investigation. The committee conducts a thorough background investigation, examining the nominee's professional history, financial records, and any potential conflicts of interest. The FBI may also conduct a background check. Questionnaire and written responses. Nominees complete a detailed questionnaire covering their legal career, judicial philosophy, and views on significant legal issues. They also provide written responses to questions posed by committee members. Public hearings. The committee holds public hearings where senators question the nominee about their qualifications, judicial philosophy, and past rulings or writings. These hearings are often televised and provide a forum for the nominee to address concerns and explain their judicial approach. Witness testimony. The committee may call witnesses to testify for or against the nominee. These witnesses can include legal experts, former colleagues, and representatives from advocacy groups. Their testimonies provide additional perspectives on the nominee's suitability. Committee vote. After the hearings, the committee votes on whether to recommend the nominee to the full Senate. A majority vote in favor of the nominee is required to move the nomination forward. If the committee votes against the nomination can still proceed to the full Senate, but it faces a more challenging path. Full Senate consideration. If the Judiciary Committee approves the nominee, the full Senate then considers the nomination. This stage involves additional scrutiny and debate. Floor debate. Senators engage in floor debates, discussing the nominee's qualifications, judicial philosophy, and potential impact on the judiciary. These debates allow senators to voice their support or opposition and can influence public opinion. Cloture vote. To proceed to a final vote, the Senate may need to invoke cloture, a procedural motion that limits further debate. A successful cloture vote requires a simple majority. If cloture is invoked, the Senate moves to a final confirmation vote. If cloture fails, the nomination is effectively stalled. Confirmation vote. The final step is the confirmation vote by the full Senate. A simple majority is required to confirm the nominee. If confirmed, the nominee is appointed to the federal bench and takes the judicial oath of office. Checks and balances in the process. The nomination and confirmation process embodies the system of checks and balances, ensuring that no single branch of government can unilaterally control judicial appointments. This system helps maintain the judiciary's independence and prevents the concentration of power. Executive check. The president has the authority to nominate judges, allowing the executive branch to influence the composition of the judiciary. This power enables presidents to shape the federal bench according to their legal and political philosophies. Legislative check. The Senate's role in providing advice and consent serves as a legislative check on the president's nominations. Through its review and confirmation process, the Senate ensures that nominees meet the necessary qualifications and align with constitutional principles. Judicial independence. While the President and Senate play crucial roles in the nomination and confirmation process, federal judges enjoy lifetime appointments, insulating them from political pressures. This lifetime tenure ensures that judges can make decisions based on the law and their interpretation of the Constitution, free from external influences. Political dynamics and challenges. The nomination and confirmation process is inherently political, reflecting broader partisan dynamics and ideological battles. This politicization can lead to contentious and protracted confirmation battles, especially for Supreme Court nominees. Partisan polarization. In recent years, increasing partisan polarization has intensified the confirmation process. Senators often vote along party lines, and nominees face heightened scrutiny based on their perceived ideological leanings. Filibuster and nuclear option. The use of the filibuster, a procedural tactic to delay or block nominations, has historically been a tool for the minority party in the Senate. However, changes in Senate rules, such as the nuclear option, have reduced the threshold for overcoming filibusters, making it easier to confirm nominees with a simple majority. Public and media influence. Public opinion and media coverage can significantly impact the nomination and confirmation process. High-profile nominations, particularly for the Supreme Court, attract extensive media attention and public scrutiny, influencing senators' decisions and the overall confirmation dynamics. Conclusion. The nomination and confirmation process for federal judges, including Supreme Court justices, is a complex and multifaceted system that embodies the principles of checks and balances. The president's power to nominate, coupled with the Senate's role in providing advice and consent, ensures that judicial appointments are subject to rigorous scrutiny and reflect a balance of power. This process not only shapes the composition of the federal judiciary but also influences the interpretation and application of the law for generations. Despite its challenges and political dynamics, the nomination and confirmation process remains a cornerstone of the American legal and political system, safeguarding the judiciary's independence and the rule of law. Checks and balances on the judicial branch. The United States system of checks and balances ensures that no single branch of government wields unchecked power, including the judicial branch. While the judiciary, particularly the Supreme Court, holds the significant power of judicial review, its decisions and operations are subject to various forms of scrutiny and limitations by the legislative and executive branches. These mechanisms preserve the balance of power and maintain the integrity of the democratic system. The power of judicial review. The concept of judicial review, established by the landmark case Marbury v. Madison, 1803, allows the Supreme Court to declare laws and executive actions unconstitutional. This power positions the judiciary as a critical arbiter of constitutional interpretation, providing a check on the legislative and executive branches. However, the judiciary itself is not immune to checks and balances. Congressional checks on the judiciary. Congress, as the legislative branch, holds several powers to check the judiciary, ensuring that judicial decisions align with the broader principles of democracy and justice. Amending the Constitution. One of the most significant checks Congress has on the judiciary is the power to amend the Constitution. If the Supreme Court makes a decision that is widely contested or deemed contrary to societal values, Congress can propose a constitutional amendment to override the decision. This process, however, is arduous and requires broad consensus. A proposed amendment must receive a two-thirds majority vote in both the House of Representatives and the Senate, and then be ratified by 3/4 of the state legislatures. Historical examples illustrate this power. The 11th Amendment, passed in response to the Supreme Court's decision in Chisholm v. Georgia, 1793, limited the federal judiciary's jurisdiction over lawsuits against states. Similarly, the 16th Amendment, which authorized the federal income tax, was adopted following the court's ruling in Pollock v. Farmers, Loan and Trust Company, 1895, that deemed certain federal taxes unconstitutional. Legislative power and jurisdiction. Congress also holds the power to determine the structure and jurisdiction of the federal judiciary. Through legislation, Congress can establish or abolish lower federal courts, define the scope of judicial power, and regulate the appellate jurisdiction of the Supreme Court. This ability allows Congress to influence the judiciary's role and reach, providing a direct mechanism to check judicial power. For instance, the Judiciary Act of 1789 established the federal court system, including the Supreme Court's original and appellate jurisdiction. Over the years, Congress has enacted various laws to modify the organization and jurisdiction of federal courts, demonstrating its authority to shape the judiciary's framework. Impeachment of judges. Congress holds the power to impeach and remove federal judges, including Supreme Court justices, for misconduct or failure to uphold their duties. The impeachment process begins in the House of Representatives, which can impeach a judge by a majority vote. The case then moves to the Senate, where a two-thirds majority is required to convict and remove the judge from office. Impeachment serves as a critical check on judicial misconduct, ensuring that judges maintain ethical standards and adhere to the principles of justice. While rare, impeachment proceedings underscore the judiciary's accountability to the legislative branch and the public. Executive checks on the judiciary. The executive branch, headed by the president, also exerts influence over the judiciary through various mechanisms. Judicial appointments. One of the president's most significant powers is the appointment of federal judges, including Supreme Court justices. By selecting nominees who align with their legal and ideological perspectives, presidents can shape the judiciary's composition and influence its decisions. These appointments are subject to Senate confirmation, providing a collaborative check on judicial appointments between the executive and legislative branches. Judicial appointments are crucial in shaping the judiciary's direction and approach to constitutional interpretation. For example, presidents often seek to appoint judges who share their views on key issues such as civil rights, economic regulation, and the role of government. Pardon power. The president holds the power to grant pardons and commutations for federal offenses. While this authority does not directly alter judicial decisions, it provides a mechanism for the executive branch to mitigate the effects of judicial rulings. Presidential pardons can serve as a check on the judiciary by offering relief in cases where the judicial outcome is deemed unjust or overly harsh. Judicial independence and limitations. While the judiciary is subject to checks and balances, it also enjoys a degree of independence crucial for upholding the rule of law and ensuring impartial decision-making. Lifetime appointments. Federal judges, including Supreme Court justices, are appointed for life, subject to good behavior. This lifetime tenure insulates judges from political pressures and allows them to make decisions based on legal principles rather than external influences. Judicial independence is fundamental to maintaining the integrity of the judiciary and ensuring that judges can uphold constitutional values without fear of retribution. Ethical standards and recusal. Judges are bound by ethical standards and codes of conduct that govern their behavior and decision-making. These standards require judges to recuse themselves from cases where they have a conflict of interest or where their impartiality might reasonably be questioned. By adhering to these ethical guidelines, judges ensure the fairness and integrity of the judicial process. Balancing judicial power. The interplay between the judiciary and the other branches of government exemplifies the system of checks and balances designed by the framers of the Constitution. While the judiciary holds significant power through judicial review, it is not above scrutiny or beyond the reach of legislative and executive checks. This balance ensures that the judiciary can perform its essential role in interpreting the Constitution and upholding individual rights while remaining accountable to the principles of democracy and justice. Conclusion. The checks and balances on the judicial branch are integral to the functioning of the American political system. Through mechanisms such as constitutional amendments, legislative control over judicial jurisdiction, impeachment, judicial appointments, and the pardon power, the legislative and executive branches can influence and check the judiciary. These checks preserve the balance of power, ensuring that the judiciary operates within the framework of democratic governance while maintaining its independence to uphold the rule of law. This intricate system of checks and balances underscores the resilience and adaptability of the American constitutional order, allowing it to respond to evolving challenges while safeguarding fundamental principles.